lady is walking by a building. She sees a painting in the trash. There's just something about it. She likes the painting. It speaks to her, so she takes it home, finds out later it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because the painting is actually All right. Welcome back to another episode of Life, Money, You. Bjorn, good to see you here.
You too. How you doing?
Nice new digs over there. Looks like you're in a new spot.
I am in a new spot. We should talk about that.
Yeah. What's that? It looks pretty nice.
We have opened up a new location up in the Twin Cities of Minnesota in a suburb called Golden Valley. There's a new branch that has a front-facing area where we can serve our members and new members down the road. But there's also a spot in the back that has a bunch of different admin offices, and we actually have some new space for the Life Money You program. It's in the old bank vault, so we need lights in here to be able to see because there are no windows, but it's nice. I've been able to make it my own and use it for this, so it's fun to have a spot up here and be able to get out of the house occasionally.
What Bjorn didn't tell you is that the only way to get back into the Life Money You space is actually through the air ducts, and then you have to load yourself on wires into the work area. But if you can do that,
exactly.
It's a lot of fun. It's our own personal space. Yeah, congratulations on the new digs. I have not seen them personally, but they look like they are coming along quite nicely. For those of you up in the Twin Cities that would like to see Bjorn in person or the Life Money You facility in person, I encourage you to go by Golden Valley. Truly is golden.
It's
good
golden.
Name there. I have a question for you, Bjorn. Do you know why casting The Rock in movies is an easy decision? Because he's the bolder option.
Oh, wow. That stretched me. That stretched me to pull a laugh out from somewhere deep.
We'll subscribe to laugh tracks.
Yes.
I bring that up because it's not about The Rock. It's about decisions today. And I wanted to talk to you about decision making. And actually, what we wanted to talk about is a book that we both read, Sway. We actually read it a little while ago, so our memories may not be as fresh on it as possible. But hopefully, the delay has let the information wash through us, marinate, and so we can internalize it. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is I had read this book initially when it came out years and years ago, and I actually really liked it because as I was thinking about us as creatures of habit, as consuming, purchasing people, as workers, as family members, right? We're making decisions all the time. And one of the things that I think you and I might agree on in the financial world is that people make a lot of poor decisions. That sometimes we know they're poor decisions when we're making them. And yet we continue to make poor decisions. Yet if you were to be objective and look at someone else's life and weigh in and maybe control the decisions they're making, we'd maybe make better decisions, more rational decisions. So one of the things I've always been intrigued by is why do we make these bad decisions? How can we identify when we are making bad decisions so that we can make better decisions moving forward? And so this book is really about acting irrationally, making poor choices. And I thought it might give us some insights so that we can help people when they are making financial decisions for themselves, even long-term financial decisions, and especially for the people that we work with as financial coaches or the financial coaches on our team that work with people. I was thinking maybe if we go into the psyche of people, we'll give some people ideas of how, one, we can help them, but two, if you were just listening and trying to make better decisions on your own, maybe you'll find some methods for doing that. Totally. That's what I thought I was hoping we'd take away from this book. What about you? Any thoughts going into it or having read it now?
I do think that as a coach, it's helpful just in terms of an empathetic look at how people are acting. We've both worked with people where they give us a description of what's going on and you're, wow, how do you even live? How do you work? How do you get up every day? It's just so bad and so many problems and stresses and that kind of thing. And I think this just helps to remind you that it's may not have all been like rational choices that they were making. They may have been swayed, I guess, to use the word. Maybe they thought they were making the best choice and it ended up not working out in their favor. It helps me come into those conversations with a better understanding, not as the expert coming in to be the doctor to solve all the ailments, but really understand that it's not cut and dry. It's not always easy to navigate. You may like literally have been influenced to do it a certain way, or maybe you saw an example of someone doing it a certain way and you thought that was the right way. And so I guess it helps create a more well-rounded way of looking at a situation with somebody, and gives me a chance to realize that
he has a lot of stories, a lot of specific examples of people either being forced or volunteering to make poor decisions. And I want to start at the very beginning, because it's not an air disaster that I was intimately familiar with. It was happened a while ago, but it's still, I think, the worst air disaster in history. More people died in this airplane collision than I think in any other disaster. And we've seen some big airliners go down. But what is interesting about the story of Tenerife is that it was really an unforced error that was an accumulation of very poor decisions based on some really weird incentives. So let me share with you a little bit of what I recall here. So basically, there is a flight, and now I probably won't even remember what it is, Lufthansa or something like that, but it's a 747, and they are going to some place in the Canary Islands, I believe. They get diverted to Tenerife because of an accident at the airport. So they just get delayed. They're going to still make it there, but they're redirecting all the traffic there, and they're landing airplanes. And this pilot, a pilot who is a veteran pilot, I don't know how many decades he's been on the job, but is also a safety instructor for the airline. So he knows all of the procedures in and out, all these things to do. What he does is he realizes that because of the crew's sleep requirements and things like that, if they don't leave the island in an hour, they're going to have to kind of shut down for an evening. And then he is waiting for the fog to lift. So they're getting delayed on fog. And then he decides to get the plane refueled to save him some time in whatever the destination is. And the refueling starts happening while the fog lifts. And so he sees this window closing. And it's just like all these things that keep accumulating in his mind. And eventually, he decides the plane is refueled, the fog is starting to roll back in, and he is just going to take off without clearance from the tower. And runs it up to full throttle. The first officer protests a little bit, and the reveal here is that at the other end of the runway, there is another 747, and he can't see it, and they can't stop, and the two jets collide. And this is not a mechanical error. It's not weather-related particularly. If people had followed their procedures, if they had not made human errors in this process, those people would be presumably alive. We would have avoided the worst disaster in human history. And you think about this. You think, how could a pilot just get so frustrated with a redirect and then a weather delay and then a refueling delay to put 600, 700 people's lives in jeopardy? And I think what they talk about here is that we get caught up in the act of losing. And oftentimes we get so obsessed with mitigating the loss or avoiding more and more loss that we will do anything to overcome it, even if the downside far outweighs the upside. Yep. And I think this was a classic case of he didn't want to keep losing it. Hopefully you and I and anyone listening is not going to be in this kind of situation where they will make some sort of grave error like this, especially that affects other people. One of the things I was thinking about, Bjorn, in a realistic sense, is there was a celebrity, and I'm not going to name her name, this was years ago, but she was behind a car at a crosswalk. I don't remember if you remember this. And there was I think a mother pushing a child in a stroller in front of the car. And she couldn't see them because they were in front of the car in front of her. But she decides that she gets so fed up, she's laying on the horn, the cars are moving. She cuts around the outside, guns it, hits the mother and the kid, kills both of them as she's barreling through the crosswalk. And it's like one of those things where, to me, it's like, what would have been the harm in waiting another 10, 15, 30 seconds? Yeah. And now you've got two fatalities because of this impatience, because of what I thought was this inability to lose, this irrational desire that this loss is going to be permanent forever, whatever it is. And the stakes are sometimes so high. I was just thinking about that, like on a smaller scale, and yet big stakes. But how many times on a small scale do we make silly decisions like this that end up costing us a bunch that nobody dies, but I certainly feel like I've gotten caught up in this as well. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think
trying to avoid a loss.
So thanks for sharing the details on that. What I thought of right off the bat was just like in our financial lives, I know that a very common example of this are people at casinos. This is the same exact thing that happens all the time. People, they've got high hopes for the evening. They put down a bunch of money. They lose it super fast. They lose again. And instead of walking away and just taking the tough night, they try to win it back. They think that, okay, that 1 in a million chance or that 1 in whatever chance, I'm going to do that. It's almost like we're thinking that one really big positive can overcome a lot of negatives. And so they just keep going and they dig themselves further into a hole and they lose way more money than they ever thought. That's why casinos have nice looking buildings and really nice hotels and everything, because they're paying for it somehow, and it's usually partially coming from you. If you just can look at it objectively and not be in the situation, of course it looks silly. Like, this guy is like top-notch, safety instructor, been teaching other pilots how to do this, would have never, ever done this. But then when you're in the situation and it's loss after loss after negative, if you don't have any time to think about it, reflect on it, talk to somebody about it, get help, have some time, sometimes it can really almost build up. Like it sounded to me almost as you were describing, I was like picturing a snowball. It's like almost how I think people get into debt sometimes, where you open up a credit card and then, okay, that wasn't that painful. I just racked up a few thousand in credit card debt. It's not that painful because the minimum payment's kind of small. I can overcome that. And you take out another loan and then that adds up. And then you take out another thing and that adds, and then an unforeseen thing happens. And then you have to take out debt because you don't have any money saved. And so it's that same kind of snowball effect that can happen where all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, it's way bigger than you ever thought. You finally have a chance to take a step back and you realize that. But I just think of people I've worked with who have worked for years and years in the wrong direction on their finances. And those are some of the same kind of people that buy lottery tickets regularly because they're looking for the quick out. If I could just win the lottery, all taken care of, I don't have to worry about it anymore. They're just kind of have that jackpot mentality where for almost everybody, it's not going to be the case and it will take some hard work. And so I think if he would have been able to talk through what was going on with somebody, or if he would have had time to pause and be out of the situation, which I get is hard because he couldn't, because all these things were happening suddenly and unexpectedly. I think that would have helped. And if I put it in our lens of personal finance, that's where I do think for some people working with a person like an expert is actually the best thing, because you have to talk through it. You might even need to sleep on it a little bit. That's why the wish list on Amazon or wherever is helpful, because you may be thinking differently the next day. And that's actually can be a really good thing for a lot of people. So it's actually a really good story because it's like this kind of massive failure in the most unexpected way. But you realize that kind of stuff can happen because it is kind of a slippery slope. If a lot of bad decisions are made consecutively, that you feel like you have to do something dramatic to overcome it. And actually, you don't have to. That's not the way out. That's risky behavior, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's what's the worst that can happen, I think, is sometimes what you need to ask yourself. What's the worst that can happen? Yep. One of the things that I was thinking about, and would you say this is similar? We talk about spending creep a lot, whether it's in your personal spending or house shopping. And I'm a victim of that too. And I think one of the things that happens is spending creep goes up as patience comes down. And one of the things that I was thinking about is when my wife and I were trying to buy our first house, we were shopping around. We had a budget. We weren't going to deviate from the budget. We had a list of the things that we wanted in the house. And it was like, hey, these are black and white. We're going to get them. We're going to keep shopping. We're going to be patient until we find everything that we want. But then as you find some places that are more expensive and they offer less and all these other things, now you're starting to like move that budget up just a little bit. Or maybe compromise on the things that you want. Maybe instead of an attached garage, it'll be a detached garage. Maybe instead of having 2.5 baths, it'll just have 1.5 baths or whatever it might be. Yep. And I just remember us having talks about, are we going to move it up another $25,000, $50,000, $75,000 as you get more and more impatient. And sometimes it's just the human nature and the emotion of it. You just don't have the patience or the hope sometimes to stay within your budget, and things can get out of hand. For example, the other time I was thinking about this is we were going downtown and I was refusing to pay $20. I saw a lot that said $20 to park here, and I was like, we're going to find street parking. Couldn't find street parking. Ended up going back to the lot that was charging $20, but then they were full because now it's getting evening and it's on the weekend. And so then we passed another lot and it said $35. And I was like, I'm not going to pay $35 because we could have paid $25 and then go around. And then the $35 lot was booked. And I ended up paying parking in a parking structure that was $20 an hour. So I ended up paying way more for the evening in parking than I had intended. But if I had just made like a rational decision, like at the beginning, instead of maybe aiming for the kind of the irrational outcome, I would have been better off. But by the time you get so frustrated and you've gone all the way down there and you're not going to go home, you're going to have that night out. Now it's just going to cost you because of decisions I made. It wasn't anyone else particularly. I feel like these types of combinations of frustration and willingness to try to solve problems with money can be manifested in our everyday life and show up in the budget, show up in where there isn't money at the end of the month, and show up as credit card debt.
Yeah.
You just get frustrated with
it. I think the point, what you're bringing up is an interesting point here, and that's that if you don't have any margin, I'm just trying to think of a term that could cost different areas of life. There will always be some form of an unexpected thing that will happen. You're not actually being smart if you don't build in some margin into your life or into decision-making, into an event, if you're trying to cut it close all the time, you're actually going to often be over the margin or the capacity because there will likely always be something that will happen that you're not ready for. And like in your case, you were going to skip the lot and then you went back and then it was full and that was unexpected. And then, of course, then your relative decision-making kind of changed because it's like, okay, now the playing field is different. There's no street parking. There's no $20 parking. So now it's only 35 and up or whatever. And building in like extra time or spending or whatever, like just building in some cushion. That's the whole idea behind cushion, having savings, having flexibility, is so that there is like some margin for the error, the mistake, the broken whatever, the unexpected car accident, like the things that are inevitably going to happen, but we never know when they're going to happen. And that can actually, I think, help here. And it probably would help this pilot too if there was a way to be able to build in some time to think through this, which I mean is hard. And I guess that's probably why they've force pilots to get some rest, is because of that factor. So that principle is an interesting one that I'm hearing come out of this a little bit. And that idea that like when we're squeezed, we oftentimes will make irrational choices or we'll go way too far with what we're thinking is realistic or good or even legal in some cases. And so you see that, I think, in a lot of cases of people doing different things in their lives that sort of shipwreck their lives. We're kidding ourselves, I guess, if we think that we can just operate at 99.9% on everything, because we were never meant to do that. We were never meant to run our lives like that. And you're not planning for the unexpected nuances and errors of life.
Indeed said, and I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up here, because I think we're both fans of football. You've got your Vikings and your Gophers up there, despite the fact that I live in Chicago. I'm a Lions fan, the lovable losers. There was actually another story, and this is also talking about loss, but it's in a different way. And he tells a story about Steve Spurrier taking over the University of Florida Gators team, I believe. And they had been perpetual losers, and he came in and turned their fortunes around. I think took them maybe to a championship. Again, don't know the whole story behind it, but basically he was just talking about teams that win generally play to not lose. And when you bring in a team that does nothing but lose and has nothing but upside, they can just swing for the fences. And I think of this, at least when I was reading it, thinking about my Lions, and that the Lions have always been perpetually bad. They have never won the NFC North. They are the only original team in the NFL to not have won a Super Bowl. So there are, I think, a lot of analogies. And one of the things that has happened over the last couple of years as the Lions have started to turn it around a little bit more is that they go for trick plays. They go for more fourth down conversions than ever, churning, I think, some of the general rules that we accept in the NFL on their head a little bit, because I think when you do have the talent and the reputation and generally a winning record, you don't want to necessarily risk that, right? Because the risk means that you might lose the whole bloody game. But if you are coming into something with the mentality that you are going to lose and not going to win, doesn't that change maybe how you attack the problem, how you approach the game? And at least in Steve Spurrier's experience, they did. They turned around and won the SEC or whatever it was. But I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Does the mentality of how you go into a situation change what you'll do?
I definitely think it does. I was just trying to put myself in the shoes of those examples. And I do think part of it is that mentality. I think another part of it is that a lot of things have to go right too. Either like your team has to be more capable than you think, or you have to probably win a few close games that could have gone either way and they just went your way. I wouldn't say that it's all that, like all the mentality of taking more risks, because sometimes things can backfire too. Like it can be a game of inches. Let's just say you go for a fake punt, right? And you try to do that. Well, I don't know what the percentage is on success in the NFL, but I'm going to guess it's pretty low overall. So let's just say 1/3 of the time you get the first down, 2/3 you don't. I feel like maybe this was the 1/3 of the time that it worked out. You won the game, whatever. I think it helps though. I think it increases your percentage of changing the direction by going into things with a no-lose mentality. But I do think it is a part of it. And if you take that part of it away though, and the other parts are true, then your chances are lower in terms of changing the trajectory of something happening. I was thinking of the analogy of a golf swing with this, just because I've been into that. And I've been struggling with the driver, hitting my driver. And if you know anything about golf and you've listened to any experts, people that drive the ball well, like we talked about in the previous episode, like the grip it and rip it mentality, there is something to that because you actually hit the ball better, further, everything if you aren't trying to control your swing. Like in my case, I'm trying to control it so much that I basically am only just using my arms to swing. That's pretty much it. So I don't hit it very far. I don't hit it very well. But the times where I literally am not thinking about it and I'm just letting my kind of body work naturally, I have crushed some shots. And it always feels like this surprising anomaly. But you realize that by playing to not lose and just going for it, whatever happens, you have to be willing to take that risk and play free a little bit. And sometimes that is actually what will help you play better. It's hard to describe it, I guess, but that has worked in that instance. And it sounds similar to what you were saying and what the book was saying, is that there's this kind of this willingness to try some new things, to play a little looser. And I think I even heard in the Super Bowl last weekend that Patrick Mahomes said at halftime, he talked to his team. He said, "We just reminded everyone, like, you have dreamed your whole life of being in this moment. Just go and enjoy the game. Go and enjoy football. You're in the Super Bowl. Enjoy it. You might not ever be here again. So go enjoy it." And they were a completely different team in the second half and they won. And I think part of it was that they played freer. They were getting controlled by the crowd or the noise, like the lights and the glam, and trying to control how they played. And they kind of let it go, I guess, to use the Frozen song. Sorry, that's a popular one in my house, but to just enjoy it. And by enjoying it, they actually did better. And it's that same concept, I feel like, that can be taken into a lot of areas of life, to just enjoy it, enjoy the moment. Don't get caught up in all the glam, all the glitz, all the whatever, but enjoy it. And you actually will probably do better, which is counterintuitive, but it's been shown to be proven right so many times in so many different areas. And so there's something to that. I just wish I understood it more and could do it more often.
We all could. Well, you opened the door to something. I'm going to try to build on your example here. Let's stay on the golf theme here a moment. Are you familiar with the AutoFlex golf shaft? Have we talked about that before?
No,
Have you
I am not.
seen that or anything anywhere? The AutoFlex golf shaft is a golf shaft that has a lot of interesting properties. It's low torque, high CPM, and basically what guys have found is like this AutoFlex shaft, which is built for drivers, adds 15 to 20 yards on pretty much everyone's golf shot. It's just incredible. The problem with it is a $800 or $900 golf shaft, right? And so it is very expensive, but it shows a lot of great promise. But why doesn't everyone use it? Because a lot of people don't have $800 or $900 of golf clubs in their golf bag, let alone a single shaft on one of those clubs. So the funny thing is, what does a golf shaft cost? We can get a true tempered golf shaft for $10, $12. So we're talking about, for those of you who don't golf, a huge differential between kind of the basic equipment and something that is supposed to be like a unicorn. Now, Bjorn, if I gave you a driver and I handed you a driver and I said, hey, this driver has a cheap shaft in it. It's probably not built for you. It's probably not built for your swing speed and flex and all these other things. It's probably not going to hit that well. So I don't expect much, but go ahead and hit the driver as best you can. And then I said, hey, Bjorn, now I'm going to give you the AutoFlex shaft in the driver. And this one should straighten out the shots, give you more distance, should be easier to swing, sound better, all these other things. And I let you just hit a bunch of shots with both those drivers. What do you think your reaction and the results will be when you're done?
Oh, I'm guessing I'd really like the auto shaft, and I would have a much better experience.
You probably,
yeah.
Right? Have I programmed you maybe that, like, even if we looked at the data, holy smokes, you added 11 and a half yards or 16 yards on average with the AutoFlex shaft. Is that possible? And yet in the book, they talked about how much pre-programming is done. And they gave all sorts of examples. I think it was like Sobe energy drinks. They said, hey, this is a kind of a cheap soda. Or they told some students, hey, this is like a mind-improving, memory-improving soda.
Totally.
I think in another example, they took a class with a visiting professor and they gave handouts to half the class and different handouts to the other half of the class and said, this professor is very smart, but he's very cold. And this professor is very smart,
That's right.
but he's very warm and charming. And what were the results of the students' summaries of the professor coming out of those classes?
Yeah. Well, the one that they said was nicer, more charming, got higher ratings. And the one that was meaner and colder got lower ratings. And it was the same exact situation. It was the same exact class, right? Same exact everything. But they just told them.
Same exact class, right?
Crazy. Yeah, it's almost like I know this
wasn't even different days or different classes.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we're influenced. I was thinking about the cost, like you talked about, but one thing that for me, I think I've seen a number of times is jewelry. So I don't purchase a lot of jewelry, but like I do get it for my wife occasionally, and I have no idea of what I should consider with let's just call it like a really nice necklace, okay? And so you can go to all different types of places, right? And the prices are very different. Go to Kohl's and I can buy a sterling silver necklace for whatever, call it $100. Go to Tiffany's, that thing's probably $1,000. Now, I have no clue if these are totally different, but I will tell you that my internal battle is, man, that Kohl's one must be fake. There's no way that thing is real. And Tiffany's must be super nice. That must be best kind of silver, top end, like just because of the price and the name and kind of that perception that's pre-programmed me to pay more, essentially. And like you were saying with the drivers, like you could look at the data could actually be pretty close, and I would still probably be willing to pay a premium for that extra shaft because you told me it's nicer, it's straighter. Like I don't know. It's I wonder what's going on there. I'm curious, like, why are we so influenced? Why does that happen? I know there's been research done on this. I'm not up on all the research, but it's a tricky one.
And to your Tiffany's example, I agree. A lot of times we use price as a signal. I think there's a story in this book of an immigrant who makes hot dogs and he wants to undercut the market and he loves hot dogs. They're gourmet hot dogs and he decides he's going to sell them on the street for $1. Everyone else is selling them for $2. He's just going to own the market by undercutting the price. But guess what? He doesn't sell any, is what I recall. And so not only that, he starts throwing in other things, get a drink, get a side, all included in the price. And again, what is your reaction or my reaction to seeing that? It must be bad, right? Yep. If something's cheaper and you're getting more of it, like you said, price is a signal. I got to imagine there's something wrong with it. Until he totally flips the script and decides to sell them for $3. So instead of competing with the market at $2, he sells them for $3. And then the business just takes off because now people say, $3, they must be better. They taste it, it is better. Yep. He just blows up. And I believe it's Nathan's Hot Dogs now in New York or Coney Island or wherever it is. So it just became this huge enterprise for him. But like I said, it was all a price issue. There was never a situation where he was changing his recipe or formula or anything like that. So don't get suckered into the price. Sometimes, I'll tell you what, Bjorn, I have a tendency to do this. And tell me if you are ever fallible as a human like I. You're looking through a catalog, maybe through golf stuff, and you're like, oh, look, this golf towel is exactly what I want. It's got everything. It's got a magnet in it. It's got nice embroidery. Oh, that waffle pattern. It's great. There's another towel right over here. It doesn't have everything I want, but the towel I want is $7. But this one is $13. It's weird. This one doesn't have all, but there must be something better about this $13
There's got to be something better.
Towel. You know,
isn't that weird? Yeah.
Well, forget it. I'm just going to get the $13 one. I know it's going to be better for some reason. Doesn't that ever happen?
You go for it. No, I think what makes it even harder is like when it lands in like either an indistinguishable category like that, or a category that you don't spend a lot of time purchasing. You don't do it very often. I'm thinking of, how about like mattresses or furniture, like couches, right? And we've all, most of us have probably purchased a couch at some point, but like you probably don't do it that often. It's probably a once every few years kind of thing. And so the prices change, and there's prices all over the place. And so like you go into a furniture shop and it's like, this couch is nice and it's comfortable and it's $900. And then you go to another one and it's $1,250. And it's just like, you can't prove out all the costs of all the materials and all the extra, and it's almost impossible to figure it out. But I definitely know that I am swayed to think that $1,250 is a little bit nicer. It's a nicer couch. It's going to do more for me. And you almost have to remind yourself, what are the table stakes things that we need to have that have to be met by whatever I'm buying? And if those are met, then is that good enough? Is that going to be good enough? Or am I going to be influenced because of some other things? And that's where I think having a period of time to wait on a big purchase. I know that it's hard, and especially if you're busy, it's hard because you might have that one slot of time to dedicate toward it. But taking a step back, thinking through it, looking at some other options, maybe even just literally waiting on it for 24 hours is not a bad thing, because I don't know if you're like me, but on different days, I feel differently about purchases. And one day I'm usually golf stuff, like I'm really on it, very excited about it. And then the next day I'm thinking about other things and it's not as important. And so then I'm more willing to go, I don't need that. I don't need to buy that extra $100 thing, extra $500 thing, whatever it is. It can be even less than that. There's something messed up inside that makes it hard for us to decide here. And that's where we need other people, or we need time, or we need just like margin to make better decisions. And I think having that, whether it's a board of directors or even just a go-to person or known kind of experts, even somebody that's done it before. That's kind of what we're trying to do in the podcast, is we're trying to do stories, things that we're actually doing or that we have done, so that we can actually be someone worth listening to about it. Because otherwise we're just guessing at what you should be thinking about. But it's way more helpful to have someone that's actually done it, gone through like couch shopping, and they're like, here are all the places we went to. Don't go here. It's way too expensive. Don't go here. They have nothing that's worth looking at. Look for these things. These are the features that you want. This is what's going to last a long time. Do you have a dog? Okay, don't get this kind of couch. You just want to have some of those pieces of wisdom from somebody that's just gone through it or recently gone through it, so that you get good advice.
And I think you said it too. It's like, can we just extract the price out of the decision process sometimes? Because I think there were a couple examples of sometimes we miss things that are super valuable because they don't have a price on them. So there's a couple examples I think I remember from the book. So correct me if I'm wrong on these, but a lady is walking by a building. She sees a painting in the trash. There's just something about it. She likes the painting. It speaks to her, so she takes it home, finds out later it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because the painting is actually a stolen painting, and the thief kind of freaks out when they get out into public and they just drop it in the alley. It's because it wasn't presented nicely, or it didn't have a huge price tag on it, right? Everyone else that walked by that painting just passed it over. And I think there was another one where it was some famous violinist, which would be beyond me. You'd probably be more in that space, decides to just set up a chair in Grand Central Station or something like that, pull out his $3 million Stradivarius and start playing, and nobody stops and listens, right? This is something that people would probably pay hundreds of dollars to see in a concert hall, and you probably sell out every time, but because nobody knows who he is, because he's not dressed up in a tuxedo, it's just another street performer that everyone pays no attention to. And so if we don't sometimes are told that this is expensive or valuable, we just tend to ignore it. And yet sometimes I think if we just say, is this something I enjoy? Is this beautiful music? Is this a visually enticing painting or whatever it is? And forget about the money, then I think we're better off. Maybe we'll make better financial decisions as well. I want to move on here to another story, if you recall it. Yeah. And because it had two outcomes. One I think we would predict now that we've been talking here, and one that I don't think we would predict. And I think the story was, it was military officer candidates coming through an officer training or leadership school. And they were all generally the same. And what they did is they just randomly put in some of the people's files, like half the candidates, that based on our testing, this is a high potential candidate. And based on our testing, this is a low potential candidate. And I don't know if the story is ringing a bell for you, but a couple things end up happening out of that. And I don't know if you want to kind of, do you remember what the obvious one is?
I think the high potential candidates did better on average because there was like this pre-programmed mentality that they were better, they were smarter, they were whatever. And so they fit the narrative. And I don't know what it is. Maybe then it's a catching people doing things right kind of mentality. Like you err more on that side and you're more willing to ignore the signs of not that because you've already made up your mind in some ways. It's already been made up that this person's high potential. So now I'm just going to look for all those things that kind of fit that narrative. And the other things just must be one time, not consistent, don't have to worry about those. And it's not as objective as it should be. And I'm going to assume that this happens, by the way, in the work world a lot too.
Couldn't you say workers are trying to game the system by using those things as an advantage? Hey, going to a school with a great reputation or playing on a sports team. Okay, I played basketball at a D1 school or whatever. You're trying to leverage all these things. Oh, you must be smart. You went to this school. Oh, maybe this candidate isn't as good because they went to this other school. And so maybe you get put into those lanes. The thing about that officer candidate school is you hit the nail on the head. The weird thing, the less predictable piece of it to me, was that they actually performed better, that on their standardized testing, on all the objective measures, they did better than the other students. And one of the things that I think they said is that the candidates were never told about this. They were never told, like, hey, you've been flagged as low or a high potential candidate, because it was just an exercise. So you should not have seen any differences on their tests. What I think was the predictable piece is that the instructors could see this in their reports and say, hey, oh, this guy is supposed to be very good. We'll take care of him. And this one isn't. So maybe less to lose there. So I would have expected maybe some experiential differences between the two of them because of like the bias that the instructors might have.
Yeah.
But the fact that bore out into real measurable data is what confounds me.
It's interesting.
Because if you have the same amount of information as someone else, how do you get more questions right on the test? How do you do better? Those kinds of things surprised me. There were just a lot of stories. What I liked is that there were a lot of experiments and studies and things like this in the book. So to me, it was like an easy book to read.
Totally.
And I think it gets into the thinking and, to be honest, helps me be a little bit more self-aware of when I can see myself going down some of these rabbit holes. I put so much work into this presentation and it's just not coming together. I'm going to keep putting work into it, right? Until this thing is fixed. And sometimes it's just a topic or it's a theory or something that's not going to come together. And sometimes I can see myself get wrapped up in things like this. But how about you? Anything that you took away from it that you can apply to your life?
Well, yeah, for sure. The price mentality, like more expensive is better. That is not true. And so how can you fight against it? How could you try to learn more about what you're getting? How can you even come in with more of a plan, especially like on a bigger purchase? I suppose it happens in a lot of smaller purchases too, but just the bigger decisions that you're trying to make and how to assess things like a house, like you said, really having a list of the things that are non-negotiables and sticking to it no matter what. Don't be influenced by like the realtor trying to sell you, even your own realtor trying to sell you up on something. You could build that garage. Like, you don't need a garage. You could build a garage. Like, that's easy. Just having these things that you have to have in place when you're looking at those options. So that one, I think, for sure. I think also building in more margin and having like a group of people or go-to people for different things so that you can talk through difficult decisions or things that haven't gone well before you just keep going down that rabbit hole and then try to make a very irrational decision to try to overcome it all, which isn't very likely to happen. So I think it's a healthier life in general just to have trusted people, trusted counselors, trusted folks that you go to so that you watch yourself and people help you identify any blind spots that you might have. So those are my big takeaways.
You know what's funny is you were talking about that, and as you're telling me the stories, I was thinking about, as a car guy, it's one of those things that always kills me, is that people go to the gas station and look at the different prices, unleaded, premium, super unleaded, or whatever, like super premium, and they look at these prices, and I think a lot of people get stuck in, I'm going to treat my car today. I'm going to go for the premium or the super premium or something like that. And I think that in people's minds, hey, the higher cost gasoline must be better, i.e., it must burn cleaner, produce more power, have less impurities. And that's not what an octane rating is at all. An octane rating is basically a rating of the temperature that the gas will combust. So you may be familiar with this. But the difference there is that different engines are constructed differently and need gasoline that combusts at different temperatures. So when they say, hey, this car runs on premium fuel only, it's typically because it's a turbocharged engine. So the engine is under a lot of pressure. And so ironically, you need gasoline that's harder to burn. You don't want pre-detonation, right? So the premium gasoline actually is harder to ignite than the regular gasoline. So there is no treating your car like, oh, this is so much sweeter or cleaner. And if your car doesn't require it, you're not getting any benefit out of it. And in fact, you may be working against it. So if your car doesn't have a turbocharger or supercharger, putting in gasoline that doesn't ignite as well may actually result in worse performance for your car. So that's another thing where it's because of the price differential on them. I think sometimes we look at that as better, and it's really just what you need that's appropriate for your car.
Interesting.
Right?
Wow.
So don't use price as a signal. Try to ignore it. That's my advice. Thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of Life Money You, where hopefully you got some ideas that might help you save a little money in your life. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.